Hello and welcome back. I am Mr. Sosotris, and today, I'm going to be talking about everything that I read in October, and it was actually a pretty good month overall. I read 10 books, and there was a good mix of really great stuff in here, so let's get into it. Now, first up is series that I finished, and I didn't really technically finish anything, but I am up to date on a series where I read the most recently published book that just came out, and that is Bones at the Crossroads by Ladarian Williams. This was a lot of fun. I really liked the first book, Blood at the Root. This is YA fantasy. It's like a magical school, and you've got mysteries and family stuff, family legacies and all that fun stuff. This book really did a good job of ramping up the complexity of the situation that was established in the first book. You do get lots of sort of day in the life moments, and I think that really helps because a lot of the big heavy stuff that comes out and is revealed would be really oppressive and kind of bleak if we didn't have those kind of more fun moments of just the kids hanging out on campus, doing magical stuff, living their lives. And I think the author does a really good job of balancing all of that. You really just feel like you're just kind of hanging out with these kids, and when they go through sort of struggles or trials or anything like that, it doesn't feel like just manufactured drama. It really feels like these are living, breathing people and facing the things that they're facing, and I'm really excited for this series to continue. I don't know how many books he has planned, if it's just going to be a trilogy or if it's going to go longer than that, but I am excited for the next book and cannot wait for it. So, Bones at the Crossroads, really excited. There's only 2 books right now, so you can get caught up really fast. Next up is series that I started, and I'm going to have to go with Dangerous Creatures here. Now, it's not technically the beginning of the whole series. It's the beginning of kind of a spin-off series to the Beautiful Creatures series, which is one of my guilty pleasure YA paranormal romance book series. It's Southern Gothic and, magic and drama, and, it's just, I don't know, the vibes are just perfect, and I really enjoyed the original series. This is a spin-off that focuses on the character of Ridley, who's sort of a dark caster in the first series. The main character, Lena, in the first series, she eventually goes light-ish, and she always had this cousin who is a siren who is able to sort of manipulate people. And she was kind of a background character, but she was important and she was a really good character. And so this series focuses on her. And the series is not finished. And I don't know if it is going to be finished because it looks like it's been kind of temporarily ended. And so I didn't want to read this series for the longest time because it just sort of makes me sad. But I went ahead and just read the first book, and this one was a lot of fun. It's funny because the stakes in this one feel big, but it's a very grounded, character-focused story. It's very much about the internal growth and change of the characters. We've got Ridley, and she's struggling with kind of how she sees herself. At this point, she's a little bit older than sort of maybe YA. I think she's like 19, 20, something like that. But she's trying to figure out sort of what her purpose in life is. She's a dark caster, she's a siren, but she knows that she can do more, but at the same time she feels very limited by the kind of role that fate has sort of crammed her into, as like she has to be the villain, and she doesn't feel like she really needs to be. She's kind of more of an anti-hero. And there's not a lot of like action explosion chaos in this one, but I still really, really enjoyed it because you just grow to love all of the characters. She meets up with this cast of kind of not rejects, but just sort of outsider people in New York, and she's caught up in this deal that she made years ago that's kind of trapped her, and there's her and her boyfriend Link, and then kind of all these other people they meet, and just the relationships that grow organically out of this group. It's just wonderful. I love the writers. The writers are Cami Garcia and Margaret Stoll, and they do such a good job of just capturing the real kind of authentic sort of feel of just being in a group of folks when you're that age. Now, the original series, Beautiful Creatures, does sort of lean into melodrama a little bit at times, especially Lena at times, because she's a little dramatic. But the series is told from the perspective of Ethan, who's the main character, and he's kind of a more grounded person. But this one, we've got just this great cast of characters, and I would love to see this turned into like a mini series or something. I know there was a movie version of the first book, which had a great cast, but it cut so much out of the book that it just felt so different. But it was pretty good. It wasn't terrible like some other adaptations have been. But I really like this series, and I'm so sad that it's not continued. But there's 2 books so far. I'm probably going to read the second book eventually, because the first book does end on a pretty crazy cliffhanger, and I do want to continue with the series. And I think there's a bunch of novellas that they've published, and I think maybe that the novellas sort of give closure to some of the characters. I don't entirely know how that works, but I'd like to think that somehow the authors were able to at least give Ridley like an end to her story somehow, even if it's just kind of, happily ever after or not something. I need to know something that's not a cliffhanger. So I probably will eventually read the second book. We'll see how it goes. It's in my library. I do have it, but again, I really don't like reading things that don't like have closure. And I hear the second book does end on a cliffhanger as well. So I don't know how much I want to torture myself with that. But if the series is completed and the novellas, the kind of supplementary stuff that's been published, then maybe that's fine. We'll see how it goes. But for just enjoying the reading process and the experience of getting to know these characters and spending time with them, this was a really good reading experience. So, if you're okay with the fact that it might not ever be finished, these characters are a lot of fun to hang out with. And after you read the Beautiful Creature series, Ridley is one of those characters who does jump out at you as someone that you really want to know more about, because she's just so interesting. So we'll see how it goes. I might continue. I might just put it off forever. The authors may surprise us, and they might reveal that there is a book 3 finally, or there's a novella that completes the story. Who knows? I just have to have faith. But I really love those authors, and it's a shame that we won't get more of that universe, because the authors are really fantastic and I love them so much. Next up is nonfiction reads. I didn't read any nonfiction this month, so we'll move right on. And we've got favorite fiction standalones, and I've got 2. The first one, and this took me forever to get through, not because it's bad, but just because it's so gorgeously dense that I really wanted to take my time, and that was Midnight's Children by Salman Rushdie. Now, I started this like mid-September, and I finished it like mid-ish October. Like this took me longer to get through than War and Peace did. War and Peace took me about 3.5, 4 weeks. This took me like 5 weeks. It was a very, very long process. But this is definitely one of those books you don't want to rush through. And I don't think it lets you rush through. It's not a book you can skim in any means. But it's just beautifully written. This is magical realism. It's historical. It's set during kind of the independence of India from Britain, and then partition with India and Pakistan sort of separating, and all of the kind of chaos involved in that. And you get this character who discovers that him and the other children who were born sort of close to the stroke of midnight when India gained independence, they all have sort of abilities. Now, this isn't fantasy where we get sort of an X-Men type team up and like all that. It's just, it's magical realism. So it's just sort of, he has these abilities, and He uses them sometimes, and he's aware kind of sort of how they work, but there's no like codification of it. It's sort of, there's some strange things that happen that kind of activate his powers, and then there's other strange things that happen that sort of take them away, and you just kind of go with it. And there's other sort of mystical things that happen. At one point, the characters sort of casually grow a house from like a pickled umbilical cord from a child that was saved after they were born. And it's just, you just go with it. This is very dreamlike, very poetic. It feels very grounded at times, because the way he writes people, especially, there's so many like concrete details about their mannerisms, their look, their quirks, the way they speak, all that kind of stuff. And you get a real sense of sort of what India was like in those years. The culture, the music, the food, everything. Just the vibe of society around that time. Oh, and there's a kitty here. Hello. Yes. And yet there's sort of these magical things that are sort of happening, and there's fantastical things that just sort of happen, and everyone just accepts it. And you know, the only things that really are addressed are sort of the Midnight's children, the kids who sort of have abilities. That's kind of the only mystical thing that people comment on or react to in any way, but everything else just sort of, it's accepted, it sort of happens. But this is just wonderful. I really like his writing style. It's like getting deep into a really complicated painting and just exploring the layers and the depth and the symbolism and everything. I did have to do quite a bit of like Googling while I was reading this, because there was a lot of like cultural references, historical references that I didn't get at first, and so I had to kind of refresh my memory or learn something new that I hadn't known about. And so that's probably another reason why it took me a little longer to get through. But don't be intimidated by it. This is one of those books where you just sort of float along with it and just enjoy the beauty of Rushdie's prose. It's just, this was a really enjoyable read, and I'm glad that I took my time with it, because this was a lot of fun. And the other standalone is Vampires of El Norte by Isabel Cañas. And this was so much fun. I think my expectations going in were that this was going to be a much darker vampire story than I was expecting. And I'm kind of glad that it wasn't, because this is very much a sort of romantic, supernatural adventure sort of story. Think like The Mummy, like the 1999 movie. Because you've got, you know, Evie and Rick and their relationship over time, and the kind of banter between them. And then you've got also the fact that there's like undead creatures running around this desert, and there's also the historical backdrop. This takes place at the time when the United States was expanding into Texas. That's back when sort of Texas was its own thing, and the United States was sort of taking it over. And so you've just got this sweeping backdrop of like really well-researched historical detail. The author is a historian. And you've also got these wonderful characters. The main duo is, they're so fully realized. You just become so invested in their story. And it is ultimately kind of a romance. I don't know if I'd call this like a romance novel. It feels more like an adventure romance. Think like The Mask of Zorro or The Mummy, stuff like that, where there is sort of a romance at the heart of it, but it's not like a romance novel. It's just a character study with a really fabulous backdrop, and it's so much fun. The vampires in this are really cool. They're very different from, I think, a lot of the pop culture depictions, and very, very creepy. But again, it's not like a mean-spirited horror novel where it's all about the horrible, brutal, evil things that are done to people. It's much more about like survival and family, and you know, you've got this horde of vampires descending upon this group, and how do you protect yourself? There's lots of folk magic in this, and culture. The culture is so richly described, and I had a great time with this. It was very different from the kind of book I was expecting, but it was so much fun to read, and I really want to read her other book, The Hacienda. And again, I've heard that one's more of a like haunted house sort of story, and so I can't wait to read that one. I really love this author's writing style. All right, next up is books that surprised me. The first one would be Lone Women by Victor LaValle. I've read two of his books, The Ballad of Black Tom and The Changeling. I love his writing style. This book was so good. This is kind of one of those short and sweet, sort of one and done sort of standalones. It's like American Gothic, and there's supernatural elements, and I don't even want to talk too much about the plot because I don't want to give anything away, but you've got like one character who moves away from kind of a dark secret that's haunting her family, and she moves to Montana in like the early 20th century, middle of nowhere. There's no support. The nearest neighbors are miles away, and you just kind of have to make do in this tiny cabin in the middle of nowhere. Winter's coming, and all you have is like a tiny little cabin with almost no resources, and then throw into that something that follows her from her past. And it's just wonderful. This book, the character work is good. The atmosphere is exquisite. It's just, you've got this pervading sense of like empty loneliness and dread, and you don't know who to trust. There's some characters that you want to trust, but you're not sure if you should. There's other characters who betray that trust. It's so good. The cast of characters is really diverse, and it's just, if you like sort of spooky frontier, it's not really survival horror in the vein of something like The Terror, but it's just this sense of what would it be like to live out in the middle of nowhere, not knowing who to trust, with just yourself to kind of rely on. And it's just wonderful. I loved this book so much. The other one that surprised me was House of Bone and Rain by Gabino Iglesias. And this one, I think, again, it was sort of, I was expecting something maybe more fantastical. I don't really know what I was expecting with this one. I think I was just expecting more fantasy stuff, but this was so grounded. It's set in Puerto Rico during, like, I think Hurricane Maria, and the character work in this is so good. You've got this group of kids who have kind of, they take care of each other, they take care of themselves. The neighborhood they're in isn't very good, and the hurricane sort of stirs up something. There's elements of cosmic horror, there's elements of like other supernatural things. There's even elements of magical realism in this. There's some folklore, folk healing, folk magic stuff. But like all of the fantasy stuff, the supernatural elements, really just feel like icing on the cake. The complexity of this is the characters and the explorations of discussions of colonialism and, you know, Puerto Rico's statehood, if that was even a thing, and the importance of public services and all that. But again, this isn't a preachy book. It's not that kind of thing. But you just live in this world, and you get to know these people, and it's such a stark, important reminder of sort of what the people of Puerto Rico go through that we don't hear about in, you know, North America all that much. We only ever hear about the disasters. And here you get to know these people as just like a living, complex, diverse culture with lots of different folkloric traditions and religious intersections, and it was really, really good. I really enjoyed this one. This is another kind of quick, fun read. It's a little bit darker and very brutal at times, but again, it's not really mean-spirited. It doesn't feel bleak or hopeless. It's just about survival in dark times, and this was really, really well done, and I really want to read more of this author's work. Next up is books that disappointed me, and this one didn't necessarily like disappoint me that much, but I do have to kind of say that it wasn't kind of as exciting as I was expecting, but there's a reason for that, and I'll get into it. And that is The Castle of Otranto by Horace Walpole. Now, this is sort of one of the earliest Gothic novels. It was written like 1700s, end of the 18th century, and it's got a lot of elements that would inspire kind of the later Gothic novel. It's very well paced. This is very much like a Gothic soap opera almost. It's like, you know, mistaken identities and secrets and shocking revelations and murders, and, you know, it's just constant. Like, the plot is, there's a lot of plot, even though it's very short. But in terms of like the Gothic stylings, I think it evolved quite a bit. This reminds me a lot of Hamlet, just not as good as Hamlet. But you've got, like, you know, the castle, and you've got the ghost, and the ghost sort of is trying to make amends for something and to fix a mistake that was made, and you've got everyone kind of caught up in this. You've got a very corrupt king who is really gross. We don't like him. His name's Manfred, and he's not really a king. He's more like a duke or something, but he's sort of in charge of this castle. And there's a lot. There's like secret identities and, you know, revelations of lost parents and all that kind of stuff. It's a lot. But one thing I will say is I wish there was like, and I know this is sort of anathema, but I wish there was like an edited version, not to take anything out, but the way it's written is just blocks of text, and inside those blocks of text you're going to have like full conversations, and there's no quotation marks. So it's just blah 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 blah, he said, blah 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 blah, she said, that kind of stuff, and it's all just in one paragraph, and it's a little it's a little much to read, because you have to do a lot of work to kind of keep track of who's saying what. Now, the dialogue tags are pretty clear, but again, it's just walls of text with very few paragraph breaks, and that can just be very draining. And so I didn't have a super fun time reading this one, and so I kind of wish that there was like a revised version with modern punctuation. Now, I know that would be kind of wrong, because it would be changing the original layout of the original book, but we need that addition, even if it's like an appendix. If you have like the original book, and then later on then you post kind of the edited version with, you know, paragraph breaks with new speakers and, you know, quotation marks, and it would just be much easier to read. But the setting and the vibes are really interesting, but it wasn't necessarily a fun book to read, and so that's why it's sort of the books that disappointed me. The story's great. It's a lot of fun, but, you know, just know what you're getting into when you're reading the text. So that was October. There were some other books that I read. I've been reading the Dark Tower series, and so I've gotten through books 4 and 4.5, and I'm currently reading book 5, and I'm almost done with that one. And then I also read Maria Devana Headley's translation of Beowulf. I finished that. That was really, really good. But overall, it was a pretty good month. There was a big variety of things, from sort of really complex to sort of more simple and fun. But looking forward to next month, I'm going to be continuing my Outlander reread. The new narration of book 4 of the Outlander series recently dropped, end of September. Or no, end of October. And so that is now in my library, so I'll be reading that. And I'm gonna try and finish The Dark Tower. I think I might get through book 6 for sure, and I might not finish book 7, because that's quite a long one. So I might finish book 7 in December. We'll see how that goes. I do also want to try and finish reading the Oz series, like the original Wizard of Oz series by L. Frank Baum. I made it to, I think, book 7, and then sort of lost steam, so I need to jump back into that because I do want to finish all of them so I can do a video on kind of the whole series. And I'm currently reading Elfie, which is the prequel that Gregory Maguire recently released to Wicked. It's kind of looking at Elphaba as a child. And if I finish that first, it's going to be my 100th book of the year, so I'm really excited. So I'm almost done with that one, and that one's really, really good. And I think I'm in the mood for more classics at this point, so I think next month I'm going to try to read either The Brothers Karamazov or Vanity Fair. We'll see which one sort of sparks my interest, but those are both sort of big, complex classics. And then I do also want to read another Amy Tan book. There's one called Saving Fish from Drowning that I've been kind of having my eye on that I do want to get to eventually. So that will be November. And who knows, I might not do any of that because I'm very much a mood reader, so it might become something completely different. But the series that I'm going through, like Outlander and Dark Tower, I think those are kind of reliable. Everything else could be whatever just strikes my whatever strikes my fancy in the moment. So with that said, I will let you go. I will see you next week, and in the meantime, happy reading. Bye.